Hello, and welcome to rePRO Film Festival by Mama Film. I'm Mallory Martin.
I'm Debbie Samples.
And I'm Leela Meadow-Connor.
As the founders of rePRO, we're honored to present our inaugural Changemaker recognition to the one and only Martha Plimpton. Martha has dedicated decades to fighting for women's reproductive rights as the president and co-founder of A4. A4 is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing reproductive rights and ending the stigma against abortion care.
Martha has appeared in over 40 films, dozens of television programs, and on stage in theaters large and small for over 40 years. She has been politically active since she was a teenager, marching for women's reproductive freedom in the 80s, 90s, 10s, and now, unfortunately, still today. She has lobbied Congress on behalf of Planned Parenthood and the Center for Reproductive Rights, and has spoken out for women's reproductive rights at campuses and rallies across the country. Martha will work to see that a woman's right to physical self-determination becomes the standard in America for as long as it takes.
Our conversation will be moderated by A4 board member and Tony-nominated actor Ariana DeBose. Ariana stars an iconic role of Anita in Steven Spielberg's much-anticipated remake of West Side Story, has recently completed production on Ryan Murphy's adaptation of the musical The Prom, and originated the role of the Bullet in the ensemble of Hamilton's Broadway cast. She is an outspoken advocate of women's and LGBTQIA+ rights and visibility in entertainment. We're excited to present Martha Plimpton with our first ever Luminous Uterus ChangemakeHER Award, a handcrafted glass sculpture created by artist Claire Anderson. Without further ado, Ariana DeBose and Martha Plimpton.
How are you?
I'm really, really well, Ariana. I'm so happy to see your smiling, shining face.
I'm happy to see your face. You are the smartest, most sassy, radical queen I know.
Oh, well, that's very kind. That's very kind. I can't believe that's true, though. You know a lot of sassy, fabulous, smart queens.
I do know a lot of queens. I'm very privileged to know a lot of queens.
That's right.
Sassy, fabulous, radical queens. You are very much among them. Let's tell the good people how we met, because I think that's kind of fun.
I think that is kind of fun, actually. We met doing the most insane process of putting on a show I think I've ever been a part of. We did Company at the New York Philharmonic together. We had about 10 days of rehearsal. You actually rehearsed way more than I did because you were at that time in the ensemble. And so you had a lot of responsibility because the whole cast was all over the country.
Yeah, it was crazy. By the way, this cast was filled with nothing but stars. Like
all stars, yeah, awesome people.
Yeah.
Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
Patti LuPone. Craig Bierko. I mean, the list. Katie Finner.
All of them.
All of them.
Rows, just like stars. A whole galaxy.
Yeah. But you guys had to rehearse it in the room, and then we had to get the video of the rehearsal, and then we had to learn the choreography and everything from you guys who were like sort of standing in for us. Mm-hmm. And then once I think the entire cast was maybe together for like a total of maybe 3 hours before we actually went into the New York Philharmonic space, right?
And that was, yeah, and it was really, really nutty because, well, and, oh Lord, what is that man's name? I forgot his name.
Who?
His name.
Lanny?
Neil Patrick Harris. Neil Patrick Harris.
Oh, Neil Patrick Harris.
Patrick Harris. He played Bobby. I was like, you don't forget Bobby.
Nah.
He was, I don't know how he did it. He was there the least. So literally
that's right.
3 hours, and then he was still like, his tech was a rehearsal. So it was just a big rehearsal process. That was like this grand experiment that turned out to be really good.
It turned out to be beautiful, actually. And if people are curious, they can see it on YouTube.
You sure can. There are lots of really wonderful moments. Martha is killing it. It's just one of her many, many successful turns on stage. And I am the lovely ensemble dancer in the TikTok Dream Ballet in a yellow nightie, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. And I remember thinking, this broad.
Also,
I was like, keep your eye on this one. Because I remember you in that number. I mean, all the dancers were fantastic.
Yeah, it was an incredible group.
Really brilliant. I mean, everyone was brilliant. Chrissy Whitehead, oh my God.
So good.
Phenomenal dancer. I mean, all of you guys were amazing. But I remember thinking, this broad's going to be a huge, humongous star. And now Look at you. It's exactly what you are.
So crazy. It's the craziest. That's
It's
why
really great.
I'm so lucky, and like that experience, which is why I wanted to talk about it, was part of why I think the arts is so amazing, because you never really know who you're gonna meet. Mm-hmm. and where your interests are going to take you. Like, you're going to find like-minded people along your journey, and you end up finding causes that are important to you, like A is for. Hello. And of course I'm asking you so many questions, so you're going to do a lot of talking, but I cannot not let you tell the story of how you decided to create A is for with your co-founders, Kelly Overby. So I'm gonna let you do that, because that's your story.
Right. Well, it was 2011, late 2011, early 2012, I want to say. And there was this big debate going on in the country about the Affordable Care Act, AKA Obamacare, rock on, and the birth control mandate that was to be included in this bill. And this young woman named Sandra Fluck came out. She was a student at the time at Notre Dame University, which is, of course, a Jesuit university. And she was arguing that that the Jesuit university should include birth control in their health plan that the students themselves paid for.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's not like the school was paying for this health plan. The students themselves paid for their health insurance through the university's program. And the university was not allowing birth control to be included in a comprehensive healthcare package, which of course is discriminatory.
Absolutely.
And so she was invited by Congress to come and testify as to why she felt this was discriminatory, why she needed this coverage, why she felt it was important. And initially, she wasn't permitted to come, and they only wanted a bunch of white men, old men, and Catholic priests to testify. And then she got sort of raked over the coals in the public, by people like Rush Limbaugh and his ilk, basically calling her a prostitute, saying she should put an aspirin between her legs, saying she wanted to be paid to have sex. Really, really disgusting things that were meant to malign her character, and they were abusive. She was threatened. I mean, it was just a disgusting thing that she was subjected to.
Right.
When she finally was able to testify. And of course, she was brilliant in her testimony, and everything she said was absolutely correct and unimpeachable, but that didn't matter. And what we, as women in my group of friends, were so angry about was that shaming women was has always been, but particularly in this cultural moment that we're talking about, was at the center of these restrictions and these legislative attacks on our personal freedoms. That shame and stigma were central to keeping people quiet, keeping people afraid to talk about the fact that they'd had abortions, or the fact that they wanted birth control to have sex, so they could enjoy sex without the risk of pregnancy. Not just because birth control is obviously medically indicated for lots of things, but because women are sexual beings too. We, gay, straight, trans, whatever, we all deserve to be respected and have our bodily autonomy recognized, and we don't need to be shamed for this. So we wanted to get together and find a way to combat this, and A is for sort of was born out of that, of a bunch of women sort of getting together, having cocktails, and trying to figure out what it was we could do. And it's been a 9-year or 8-year process over the course of which we've developed this sort of clearer mission that we want to use art to do that, to fight stigma, to elevate voices that are unheard, to center voices that need to be centered, to make art that speaks to the realities of this issue, to reproductive justice, and the vast array of ways in which it dovetails with every other justice issue in our lives. So that's how it began. And we discovered through that and in the process that we were part of a general sort of, I hate to use this word, but zeitgeist of people really zeroing in on stigma. So then we found groups like Shout Your Abortion, founded by Amelia Bono and Lindy West, that just completely took off because it was all about speaking out, about sort of coming out of the abortion closet, if you will. And that conversation has been ongoing and has developed into what I think, and many people think, I mean, look, let me just clarify here. This wasn't a new conversation. Women of color had been having this conversation for decades, if not longer. We have to give credit for where it's due in that regard. And of course, queer women and, the LGBTQIA movements that began many, many years before. Right. So we've taken lessons from those movements about courage to come out, strength in numbers, sharing the mic, an expression you used with me the other day. Yeah. So God, what a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, but it's a great answer. And it's like, that's what you guys are all about, you're fighting for, a woman's right to choose her bodily autonomy.
And not just ours, yours too, because you're on the board now.
Yeah, I am. I'm so stoked about it. Like as you know, but the good people might not know. Mm-hmm. I've been supporting you guys from the sidelines for a long time.
That's exactly. Well, not even from the sidelines. You were one of our earliest supporters. You and Jessica Vosk, who was also in the ensemble and company, were our first two backup singers at Broadway Acts for Women. Yeah. And then subsequently you've performed there as a soloist. People have bid many, many thousands of dollars to choose the song you sing at Broadway Acts for Women, and you've knocked it out of the park every time. You've been there with us from very early on.
I love everything about what you guys have been doing, and it's so important to speak up for each other. You know what I mean? Even if you haven't personally had an experience like this specifically, if you have not had an abortion, that does not mean that you should not fight for another woman's right to be able to have access to this service. It's like reproductive rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. So if you're not going to fight for all of those, then what are you fighting for? Mm-hmm. And that's what I love about you, because you said it when you were talking about how you guys formed AS4. It's like you're a group of women all from different walks of life that just wanted to do something. And when women get together and shit happens, like we get things done, and that's just kind of what it is. So I'm really excited to see where the board goes next, because we're in a time of really great change. And I also love what I really love about you is that you're always willing to admit where you might have a blind spot, right? It's like we're like-minded in that way, despite being from different generations. Like we know what we know, and we're fierce about what we know, but when we've missed something, we do have the ability to go back and correct. It's like when you took a look at what the makeup of your board, you were like, we're missing some things.
Oh, we definitely were.
Let's go fill that in. And we have, 3-4 great new board members now. And I'm so excited to be one of them. So I think the work is going to get really good. Mm-hmm. It's going to continue to get better and better because it's already been great.
One of the reasons why I really wanted you to be, to work with us and be one of our board members, Ariana, is because of, look, you've been a supporter since we first met for a long time, for at least 5 years. But you're also on your own an extremely sort of vocal, positive, celebrant of your own self, of your own, who you are. As a young woman of color, as a young queer woman of color, as a performer, you have I want to call it bravery, because it's not easy to be in the public eye and also do this work, right? It can get, people can give you shit for it. Yeah. And you've got a very positive outlook on this work, and I love that about you.
Thank you. Oh my God, Martha.
Well, I want to, and that's kind of why I want to ask you a question too. I mean,
Okay.
I want to know what it is, because, you know, you are who you are. You've always been, you know, I mean, I've heard you talk about your wonderful mother,
Yeah.
and, you know, how she raised you so beautifully. But you've never been, I mean, it strikes me anyway, you've never been someone to shy away from celebrating who you are. So what is it in you what do you think it is in you that you access that sort of keeps you driven to visibly and vocally celebrate yourself? Because that's really important, I think, to this conversation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree with you on that. I think my mother raised me as a single parent. And she had me when she was young, and she was still in college. So we lived with my grandmother for a long time, and it took a village to raise me. Mm-hmm. So all of these women, this badass group of women that raised me, they were not perfect. And they were messy and flawed at times, but they are good women. They're smart women. They're intelligent women. And, you know, we all sort of fight like cats and dogs, but we love each other fiercely, and we fight for each other fiercely. And I think that's where I got it from. I never once saw a woman in my youth that was not proud of who she was, or could not own her mistakes. You know, it's like my mom is incredibly outspoken, and she raised me to be the same way, but she also raised me to, you know, do your homework, know what you're talking about. If you're going to open your mouth, you better be ready to stand by it. You know what I mean? Like, it's to me, just like basic principles of living. And sometimes I don't understand how other people don't do that, but you know, to each his own. But I think that's where it comes from. And it's also being an artist, and we can talk about this more, like the intersection of like who you are as a human and who you are as an artist. In a way, they're one and the same, because art is the business of humans.
Yes.
And
it's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, it's the business of humans. And if you can't be proud of yourself, then how can you make great art? You know, like you can work your stuff out in your art. Don't get me wrong, but if you can't stand on your rock, right, and own your rock, and, you know, lift your rock up to the light, what are you doing? That's sort of how I live my life, and I try to, you know, surround myself with, you know, lots of different types of people, but a lot of women. Not gonna lie, right? Like, lady lover, we love ladies, but it's like that's what it's really about for me. It's all the different women that I've come in contact with in my life.
Well, we have that in common. We both come from single parent homes, raised by our moms, you know, and you know, although we're generationally, it's a little bit different. I mean, I'm born in 1970, and that was a different story back then. You know what I mean? But like, you know, it's like her mom said, when my mom, she tells a story about how when she found out she was pregnant, and she went, you know, home to her mom to break the news. And she said, "Mom, I have something to tell you." And my grandmother said, "You didn't get married, did you?" And my mom went, No, I'm pregnant. And my grandmother went, "Oh, thank God."
I said, I love that. That more often, like that's
right. And that for 1970, that was a little unusual, you know. You know, and that was before Roe v. Wade was the law of the land.
Right. Well,
you know, abortion was legal in New York, but not all over the country. And you know, just bringing it around to now, you know, my mother, of course, you know, her mother would not have judged her had she chosen to terminate her pregnancy. She knew that was her choice to make. My grandmother was also an intelligent woman, a pianist and a jazz musician, and, you know, kind of a groovy broad anyway. And they were living in the West Village in the 60s. And, you know, and my mom was a hippie and hair and, you know, but she knew she had an option is what I'm saying. But, you know, most women at that time in the country did not.
Right.
And now we're coming up, now here we are in 2020. Roe v. Wade has been the law of the land since 1973.
Yeah.
And now in this country, abortion is less available nationwide than it was in 1973. And that's because of restrictions, legislative restrictions, trap laws, which is targeted regulation of abortion providers. You know, these kinds of laws that are meant to make it so difficult to obtain an abortion that it's effectively, not a right anymore. What good is a right if you can't exercise? No, something like 90% of counties in the United States have no abortion provider.
No abortions at all. Like no.
Some states have only one, and maybe that state will have particularly onerous regulations, like anywhere from a 24 to a 72-hour waiting period. They may be 400 or 600 miles away, which makes it impossible. They may have parental consent laws, which make it impossible or extremely difficult for a young woman or a young person, a minor under the age of 18, to obtain care, which puts them at risk for, violence at home or, any number of difficulties with having to get a parent's permission. Who knows, what their personal situation is. They have to go to a judge. How do they get a lawyer? All of these crazy things. So at the time when I was born, there were more options for people like my mother than there are today. Maybe not in New York State, but certainly nationwide.
Right.
And so much of that has to do with this notion that somehow women's or the reproductive lives need to be monitored, controlled by the state. And why is that? What is that? What is the reason for that? Well, it could be economics.
Right.
It could be political. It could have to do with, religious beliefs. But most of the time, I think it's political. I think it's about power, don't you?
At least in the last, 4 years, it's definitely been about that.
Yeah.
But time after time, it's always about that, the balance of power. Right. And it's just really unfortunate that a woman's body is a tool to be wielded in that struggle for power.
That's absolutely right.
Unacceptable.
It's totally unacceptable. It's also unacceptable to use, and you know about this, to use the bodies of women of color,
right,
in this way. These are things that have been spoken about for many generations, as we said,
years and years. And it's I did want to share this with you. I don't know. I'm sure you're much more learned on many things than I am, but
not necessarily.
I got when I was researching and studying for to film West Side Story, my goal was just to get into the psyche of what it meant to be a Puerto Rican woman in 1957, right?
Right.
So I stumbled upon this this article about Operation Bootstrap. You ever heard of it?
No.
So, and honestly, I took notes so that I wouldn't butcher this because it's really, really important. So
I'm taking notes too.
Operation Bootstrap. There were two major components. It was about, at the end of the war, the state-promoted process of industrialization was replaced with a system of incentives and essentially tax breaks, trying to attract private U.S. capital to Puerto Rico. But there were two major components. The migration, and it's important to note Puerto Ricans are migrants because they're citizens. Yay. They were encouraged to move to the mainland, predominantly to New York City. The second component of this was a direct attack on reproduction through the use of, and I quote, experimental contraceptives and surgical sterilization of women.
Mm-hmm.
So a woman in 1957, a Puerto Rican woman, would go in, have her baby, and a doctor would sterilize her without her permission. And she wouldn't find out until years later, until she went to the doctor and was like, you do know you're sterile, right? And it broke my heart. the fact that women who look like me were just considered inconsequential in order essentially to control, size of population and the makeup of the population. To maintain that balance of balance of power, the patriarchy, and it's that's part of why when you called, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to join the board because I want to figure out how we can prevent things like that from happening. You don't see that happening as much today.
There are instances of it happening in First Nations communities, in Native American communities, on reservations. You also see it happening in prisons.
Yes,
and these are numbers that I'm not obviously an expert on, although I'm sure there are many people who could tell us a lot more about it. But it does happen still, and it does happen still.
Yeah, like that's part of why I'm really glad we're doing this, because I was like, I'm a young blood. I'm just like out here fighting a good fight. Like I'll do whatever I need to do it.
But that's what, and this is so important. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because it illustrates and highlights the very many things that come under this great big umbrella of reproductive justice. Because yes, it means the freedom to have an abortion, the freedom to terminate a pregnancy at will, if you want to, or even if you don't want to and you have to. It also means the freedom to have the children you do want, to have them in safety, to have them in a birthing process that is respectful and safe, that is not a risk to your life.
Family planning, like Kerry Washington and Gabrielle Union had a great conversation on a podcast the other day about that. What it means to be a woman of color and motherhood and reproductive rights that belong to you as a result of being a mother. And that's the part of the conversation that people are missing. It's this stigma around abortion that ultimately doesn't matter. It shouldn't be there.
Well, it's a red herring for
red herring.
It's a red herring. It's a cover for a whole ideology that says that reproduction is the domain of white, straight men. They are the ones who determine who gets to have, who gets to make babies, who doesn't, why, when, where, how. They want to control this. Now, we could get into a whole philosophical conversation that I'm personally not equipped to have about that. And also, I don't have time to psychoanalyze people like this. It's not really, it's kind of a waste of my time. But you are right. It's a vast array of subjects. And that's why, for example, this film festival is so important, because we need to hear those stories from all different perspectives and from all different sides of it. We're talking about environmental justice. We're talking about the school to prison pipeline. We're talking about economic inequality and economic injustice. We're talking about Black men and women being killed by police officers. We're talking about the right to raise your children without the fear that they might be killed by a cop. These are all connected, right? All of them. And certainly it's why AS4 wants to participate in that artistic conversation, because what changes minds, what really touches people is art, usually, right?
Yeah.
If we can communicate our experiences through art and elevate those stories and center those stories, we have, I think, a greater ability to experience empathy for the very vast array of lived experiences that people have.
Well, it's like we talked about earlier, being in the business of humans.
Right.
Like that's the point of art, the point of specifically theater, and I believe, film and television, is to reflect back these lived realities. And now we're in, like you were referencing, we're in this moment where we really are pushing for stories of, minorities. Even though we're not minorities, we're actually moving very quickly towards being the majority in this country. those stories need to be told. And these perspectives, specifically involving the subject matter of this film festival, it's really exciting to know that like there's more opportunity for a story of a woman like me to be told, right? And in regards to this particular lived experience, to create that opportunity for empathy. And because if you said it, if you can change hearts, then you can change minds.
Yes. And I think, look, we know we're in the majority in terms of believing in the right to physical autonomy when it comes to reproduction and abortion. I mean, the majority of Americans agree with us on this. You know, there may be variations within that, but you know, very often the questions are sort of weirdly skewed, and it's hard, you know. But look, the majority of Americans believe that every human being should have the right to determine when, if, how they have a child, how many children, all of this. So that we know. I think what's harder for us as a culture, and this is something I think across the board in this country that we've seen, particularly, you know, as a result of this horrific administration that we've been living through, that many people have been suffering from. We need to broaden our sort of cultural vocabulary. We need to broaden our emotional vocabulary around this subject, because we get very polarized very quickly. And art can do that. Art can increase our emotional vocabulary. It can open up avenues, you know, from here to here that, you know, that might not have been there before, you know. So that's why, I mean, that's why the work of AS4 needs people like you. And you know,
and this film festival for that matter, because
film festival and AS4's playwriting contest, which we're so excited about.
You about that, like I know we're still in the process of choosing those winners for like the next round, and then figuring out how we're gonna put it forth to the world. But it's like that's such a great example of how the work of AS4 is honestly just getting creative and figure out how to get this perspective out.
And I was so impressed because we don't have like a huge PR machine, right? We have a pretty small operating budget.
We're grassroots, sis.
We're totally grassroots. We're an all recipient group of people. You know, it's a very small organization. It's growing, but you know, we'd rather not exist. If you get my drift, we'd rather not, you know, that it wasn't necessary. But since we're necessary, we were amazed to get like over 200 submissions of short one-act plays on this subject of reproductive justice and reproductive lives and those experiences. We are so lucky that Lynn Nottage is the president of our jury. We have an incredible people on our jury choosing these plays, and we will eventually, I think in October, we'll announce it. You'll know. I think you're going to participate probably in reading some of them.
I will just
maybe we both will. Yeah. But it's really exciting because, look, theater is also one of those places, and as well as film, you know, where you know, you sit in an audience, you're all together in the dark. What was that study that showed that people sitting in a dark theater start to develop a synchronized heartbeat after a while?
Yeah, that's right. I remember reading about that.
So the importance of theater, the importance of all of us sitting together, having this shared, you know, experience. It's really, it can be a very profound thing. So yeah, so that's what we're here to do. And
that intersection of arts and advocacy, that's what you're all about. And I think we're going to see more of that.
Absolutely.
Really exciting. So
I just want to make sure everyone knows that I'm having a beer because it's hot, and I'm using my Everyone Knows I Had an Abortion beer koozie from Shot Your Abortion. It's a little plug for Shot Your Abortion.
I love this. Check them out if you don't know about Shot Your
Hi, Amelia. Okay, yeah.
What to do? I love this plug. It's totally deserved. I wanted to ask you a few things, and it's totally on topic. Totally. And we sort of touched on it earlier, but not really. I want to know. It's like we're living in, you know, pandemic COVID-19. So it's like, from your perspective, what do you see in regards to like how that's affecting abortion care services?
Well, it's affecting it, you know, pretty badly. I mean, services are already hard to come by in most of the country.
Right.
And COVID has obviously it's made everything worse. So of course, why wouldn't it make this worse as well?
Right.
You know, if you've got a waiting period or if you've got to travel
Right.
to obtain abortion services, you're risking your life. You're putting your life in your hands. You're risking being exposed or exposing others. In states where there may have been a travel ban or there may have been lockdowns, of course, how are people supposed to get the care that they need? Particularly in states where they don't allow telemedicine to be used, where medication abortion is not available. So, you know, goodness knows, there are many abortion funds throughout the country that work very, very hard to raise money to be able to help people travel, pay for childcare, pay for transportation, and you know, a motel room if there's a waiting period. You know, of course, many people can't do this. They might lose their jobs, or if they already have lost their jobs, how are they going to pay for this care? Because there's certainly no coverage. There's absolutely no Medicare coverage or of any kind for abortion. There's absolutely zero federal funding for abortion of any kind. Of course, many insurance companies don't include abortion care in their coverage if you're lucky enough to have insurance,
Right.
which, as we know, many people don't.
Don't have.
In states like Texas, where we have one of the lowest coverage rates in the country, states like Mississippi, Alabama, you know, it's really bad. It's very, very bad. And it can cost, you know, thousands of dollars. And
No one has a job anyways.
That's right. Yeah. So it's really, if you pardon my language, it's fucked. Or don't even pardon it. I don't give a shit. It's fucked. And it's discriminatory. And it's about keeping people in a box, in their place, unable to move, unable to, you know, control their own destinies, unable to protect their own families, protect themselves. It's inhuman, it's unjust, it's a violation of their human rights. And all of it made worse by the situation with this global pandemic, which obviously, I mean, it's like, you know, it's just a disaster, really.
This is a disaster.
It is.
Truly.
Yeah.
It's like, honestly, sometimes I just have to shout like that so that I don't cry.
But I want to make sure everybody knows, and this is important to say, because lest we become too negative and, you know, not, you know, forward moving, which we need to always be, abortion is still legal in all 50 states in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And I want everyone to know that. I don't care what state you live in, abortion is legal where you live. So just be aware that whatever roadblocks are being put in your place, there are people and resources there willing and able to help you. There's the National Network of Abortion Funds. There's the Lilith Fund. There's the Center for Reproductive Rights. There's the Jane Doe. They're the ones that offer free legal help to minors seeking abortion care in states, particularly in Texas, where there are parental consent laws. They can help you. Not only can they help you get a hearing in front of a judge and protect you if you're in danger, they can also get you a hearing from a judge if you're being discriminated against for being pregnant and trying to get an education, and for some reason your school won't allow you to come to school. A lot of schools do that. So so a girl who's pregnant is fucked if she does and fucked if she doesn't, you know? So they're there to advocate for you. So they're amazing. But I want to make sure that people know that there are options for them, that abortion is legal in all 50 states, and there are people there to help you. You know, there's also the Bridget Alliance. They help women travel, particularly for late-term abortion care. Because in many states, including New York State, by the way, it is extremely difficult to get an abortion here if your life is in danger or if it's past 24 weeks. if I'm not mistaken, it's still really, really difficult, even in New York State. So they can help you travel to a place like Colorado, where you can get a legal late-term abortion if you need it.
Well, I hope you heard her, because it's important to remember. It's not something we talk about. Speaking of, I wanted to ask you quickly, things we don't talk about. Did your mother talk to you about abortion or reproductive rights and services, the birds and the bees, when you were a kid?
You know, I was raised just like you by a village of women, single women.
Mm-hmm.
I had my mom, my grandma. They were both single moms. Then I had my Nana, who was like an adopted grandma, and she was a brilliant, hilarious, gorgeous, just wonderful woman. She was a big feminist, and she actually knew Bella Abzug. I think at one point Bella Abzug said, you know, B, I think you should run for city council. And B was like, forget it. I'm too busy raising 2 daughters and trying to put them to college. Forget it.
On her plate.
But again, very independent, very strong-minded women. So I grew up knowing who Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug were. I grew up seeing Eric Jung's Fear of Flying, on the bookshelf, and knowing, from a very young age what it was about.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the environment I grew up in. So that conversation didn't really, it was always just about reality. Like, if you don't believe a person has a right to do what they want with their own body, then there's something wrong with you. You need to have that. You need to look at that. Maybe speak to a professional. But when I was 19, and I did get pregnant for the first time, and I chose to terminate the pregnancy because I was 19. I was in the middle of doing a play. My boyfriend at the time, sweet as he may have been, and I did not want to have children. We were not certain we were going to want to be in each other's lives for the rest of our lives. We're only 19.
Right.
He was still in college. I was, at the, still somewhat at the beginning of a career that I wanted to follow and pursue. I did not want to have a child. And she completely understood that. There was no sadness about it. There was no, shame about it. There was no embarrassment about it. It was like, okay, that's what you want to do? Great.
What you needed to do.
Yeah. So, of course she was empathic in terms of, the fact that it was a complication, and it was, it wasn't, exactly fun.
Right.
I was in the middle of doing a play, and I had terrible nausea from the pregnancy. And I was, sick during shows, till I could get my appointment. And thank goodness, I'm one of those people who had that access. I went to Planned Parenthood in Greater Seattle, and they were respectful, and they were professional, and they treated me with empathy and thoughtfulness. And I went in, me and my boyfriend, and I had the procedure, and it was painful, but that's they gave you a little bit of anesthesia, but I didn't go under.
Right.
Some people do sometimes.
Okay.
It was very professional. And when it was over, I was relieved. And I went home and I took a nap. And, it was on my day off. It was like on my Monday off. And the next day I went back to work, and I was relieved and happy. And, and I knew that I had done the right thing.
And that's literally all that matters.
That's what matters. And no, my mother was very, totally supportive. Absolutely.
That's the experience that I hope and wish for all young women.
Everyone who needs that care should be able to have that experience. And look, sometimes it's not easy for some people, but that's nobody's business.
Right. It's your own personal journey. When you are born into this country as a citizen of the United States, that is actually your right.
That's right.
And that's what we all fight to protect every day.
Right. Every day.
When you make art, or when you advocate, when you show up to the rallies, when you write your letters, when you donate to Planned Parenthood, when you support.
Or to individual clinics. Yeah.
Any one of
those
those
independent clinics, I mean, that's also why AS4, you know, what AS4 has been doing for a long time. I know we're almost out of time, so I want to make sure we get more questions in. But one of the other things we do is we try to highlight those independent clinics that aren't necessarily affiliated with Planned Parenthood, who may not have access to those, you know, that larger sort of, you know, bucket of money that they may have, you know, who are operating independently, who have their own staff to protect, who have their own security concerns, which are always very, very real. The safety of their staff, the safety of their patients, which are very, very real. Yeah, we want to highlight those places and make sure that people know that, you know, there are more places. Yes, donate to Planned Parenthood. It's great.
Sure.
But also, there's so many other places that also need your help.
Well, and every year, correct me if I'm wrong, but at Broadway Acts for Women, you have different representatives from these smaller organizations that are there in person. And I really enjoyed that every year, getting to hear from the people who are on the ground in these different states doing this work.
That's right.
It's like, it's one thing to be you, living, you know, your lived experience, being an actor and balancing your advocacy. Like, that is a lot. Like, you have taken on a lot being president of AS4. But it's also one of the things I really love about you and your group of women is, like, you give the light back to the people on the ground who are doing this work every day in the trenches, just trying to provide the services that women need.
Right.
And that's what I think feels like every year when we get together for Broadway Acts for Women. That we're celebrating.
So good. And it's such a bummer that we couldn't do it this year because,
Yeah.
you know, but you're right. I mean, every year we want to have people from those organizations, be they doctors or be they, you know, whatever, the people running the clinic or whatever.
Management.
Yeah, we want our audience to meet those people and really see how, you know, how dedicated they are and how, just how committed they are. Those are the stories that really matter. Those are the stories. And that's why art, again, hearing those stories, hearing people speak from themselves, hearing firsthand, it makes a difference. It really does.
Well, and I think the first time I ever heard a friend, I was in high school, talk about having to make the decision to have abortion. And it's going back to your story, that was a specific experience for you. But this girl, she was an African American, you know, she had 5 siblings. So if she did this, if she chose to keep this child, she, you know, would essentially be adding another being to the household, and she'd be doing this on her own while still trying to pitch in with her family. It was not an easy decision for her to make. And I say that, and I share that instance from the place of sometimes that choice, it's layered. So the judgment around it, the stigma around it, that's where I go back to empathy. You know, you never know what someone's walking around dealing with and why they came to the decision that they made, which is why I'm in the business of humans, because I love hearing people's stories, and I love having the privilege and the honor of telling them for that reason.
And what I love about you bringing that up is because it's an individual, layered, nuanced experience for every single person. It is no one else's place to insert themselves into that by suggesting somehow that questioning yourself or experiencing that nuance somehow means that you will regret something, that you will be harmed by it. But it's not true. And it's also nobody's business. That's a conversation one has with oneself. It's nobody else's business. And more importantly than it being nobody else's business, no one else is an expert on you.
Right, you're your own expert.
You're your own expert.
I mean,
you're the CEO of you.
I'm a walking business. Leave me alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways to communicate that very basic reality, but you know, look, I have friends and I believe in this who celebrate abortion. You know, there's a whole thank God for abortion movement, and I love them. There is nothing so bad but what's the Shakespeare thing? But thinking makes it so in Hamlet or some fucking thing. Anyway, yes. Do we have any questions from the public that we want to answer before we go?
There were a few. Okay, let's hit it. Favorite Broadway acts for women performance?
Oh, shit. Well, that's impossible because, first of all, you're here. You're sitting right here.
No.
You are actually one of my favorite performers we've ever had. But the thing about Broadway acts for women is you never know what you're going to see. It's totally unrehearsed. So we never know what song Patti LuPone is going to sing. We don't know what Tanya Pinkins is going to sing. We don't know what Montego Glover is going to sing. We don't know what Betty Buckley's going to sing. We have no idea. So, and you guys don't know either.
We do. No, we have no. We literally.
Betty Buckley did a Radiohead song.
And it was badass.
And it was bad. It brought the house down. She did High and Dry, and it was so brilliant. She actually ended up recording it for her record. How cool is that?
I love it.
But no, it's just, that's the uniqueness about it is that you just, and it's not recorded. We don't stream it. It's private. So you have to be there in the room to find out what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So there are so many moments that like, I think, oh my God, so many moments. When Patti LuPone closed the show and she brought up everyone. Remember, this was the first time we did it.
Here.
And she did Natural Woman with everybody, with all the women singing.
Iconic.
I mean, right now, just thinking about it, I have chills. I have goosebumps. It was so fabulous.
Like,
what's one of your favorite moments that you remember?
Oh man, well,
there's a lot.
There's a lot. I mean, you got up there with your dad the last time that I sang.
That's right.
That song, it was amazing.
Oh, that was a Radiohead song too.
Radiohead.
Creep.
I don't remember the words to that song, but it was a great song, and I was just like, "Look at them go!" No,
it wasn't Creep. Howard McGillen sang Creep, and that was awesome.
That was really good.
We liked that. Was beautiful. That was our first year. I'm trying to remember what. Oh no, it was. I can't
remember.
It was.
I just remember watching the two of you, and I loved it.
I don't remember what song we sang. That's terrible. I should remember.
It's okay. I think I had too many rosés that night, so
yeah, probably.
It's a great night.
That tends to happen. I mean, I kind of have to do that if I'm going to take my shirt off, which I do every year.
I mean,
I don't know if it's getting old or what, but
ladies and gents, ladies and ladies, whomever, come.
Next question.
But not least, and it's the best question. Well, I think the best question.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you hope, specifically right now? What's giving you hope?
What's giving me hope? It's the way you asked that question made me almost cry, actually. Mm-hmm. What's giving me hope?
It's a hard time. There's got to be something.
I know there is. There is. What's giving me hope is young women like you, young women, the young women who are at the forefront and, who started the Black Lives Matter movement. Mm-hmm. The young women like Greta Thunberg, mm-hmm. Young women who are out there on the street, standing arm in arm, young women who are out there being visible about their queerness or their gayness or their transness. Young people who are celebrating themselves and not letting anyone tell them they shouldn't. That gives me hope, because there's still so far to go. But these young people, it's like they have it, it's in them. It can't be extinguished. It can't be taken away, and that's something a person like me of my generation might have had to learn to do. Does that make sense?
It does.
And I'm still learning. Look, we all are.
We're all still learning. I'm learning so much. Like,
but I think that, you know, that fearlessness, that's what gives me hope.
I will share, I don't know if you know this about me, but I have a tattoo on my left rib that says fearless with a capital L.
Nice.
And that's how I live my life.
Nice. Yes, you do. Yes, you do, Ariana.
You cannot be afraid. You cannot be afraid of yourself and your own potential and your possibility. You cannot be afraid of your ambitions or your feelings or what you want out of life, because you deserve any and all of those things. And that's what I want. It's what I want for you. It's what I want for my sisters, for my LGBTQAI plus brothers and sisters. Like, that's what it's about. And the acceptance, not just the tolerance of folks like us, but the acceptance that this is who we are. This is America. This is what it means to be a woman in America. And it's a really awesome time that we're all a part of, because this is what change looks like. It's like redefining who we are and what we stand for. And I think this is why talks like this matter. The acknowledgement that this is the moment we're in, and that it's going to get better because it has to.
I completely agree. And I'm really, really grateful that you agreed to do this with me and chat with me about all this stuff. And I just love you so much. And I can't wait till I can actually hug you.
I love you.
Congratulate you on everything.
Oh,
I love you to bits.
I love you to bits. I'm so proud to be your friend.
And congratulations to all the filmmakers, by the way.
You guys, your films are amazing.
They're beautiful. Congratulations. Keep doing it. Keep up the good work. Keep telling those stories.
For this festival over and over and over again. We need you. We need your films. Keep
Yes.
work. I'm so proud of all of you. It's exquisite what you've accomplished. Mwah.